The Desert Ravens MC thought they owned every inch of Thunder Valley, Arizona, their iron grip extending to every business along Route 66, including the legendary Dust Dancer Saloon. For years, they'd controlled who worked there, who drank there, and who stayed in business. But when they decided to harass Sarah Mitchell, a beautiful bartender who refused to participate in their extortion schemes, they made a fatal mistake. What the Ravens didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just another small-town girl seeking a quiet life. She was a decorated Marine Force Recon veteran who'd spent 6 years hunting high-value targets across war zones, and they'd just threatened her only remaining family. The neon lights of the Dust Dancer Saloon cast a warm glow across the weathered wooden floors as Sarah Mitchell worked the evening shift with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved with fluid grace, pouring drinks and serving customers while maintaining constant awareness of her surroundings. 10 hours into her shift, fatigue pulled at her edges, but her focus never wavered. The saloon, a historic landmark dating back to the 1880s, had survived countless attempts at modernization, maintaining its authentic Western charm that drew both tourists and locals alike. The rumble of motorcycles outside grew louder as more members of the Desert Ravens pulled into the parking lot. Sarah noticed how the regular customers tensed slightly, some quietly settling their tabs and heading for the door. Through the windows, she caught glimpses of more bikes arriving, their chrome gleaming under the setting desert sun. The Ravens had been showing up in larger numbers lately, their presence becoming more aggressive with each visit. The saloon's wooden doors swung open as Jack, Switchblade Harrison, the Ravens' enforcer, strode in, flanked by 2 prospects. His leather cut displayed patches that hinted at a violent past, and his eyes carried the cold calculation of someone used to getting his way through intimidation. The regular customers gave them a wide berth as they approached the bar. "Evening, sweetheart." Switchblade's voice carried false sweetness as he leaned against the bar. "Time we had that chat about the new protection arrangement. Boss wants to make sure all businesses along the route understand how things work around here." Sarah continued wiping glasses, her movements deliberately calm despite the growing tension. "Already told your prospects last week. We don't need protection. Town's sheriff does just fine keeping order." Tom Cooper, the aging owner, emerged from his office, his usual confident demeanor carrying an edge of worry that Sarah had noticed more frequently over the past month. The Desert Ravens had been systematically taking control of businesses along Route 66, establishing a network of operations that extended beyond simple protection rackets. "Jack," Tom nodded cautiously. "Wasn't expecting the whole crew tonight. Bit much for a friendly visit, ain't it?" "Just making sure everyone understands the changing business landscape," Switchblade smiled, though his eyes remained cold. "Boss thinks it's time the Dust Dancer joined the modern era. Proper security, inventory management, special events for certain guests." Sarah noticed movement in her peripheral vision as more Ravens entered the saloon. Their patches identified them as full members, their positions suggesting military training in the way they secured sight lines and exits. Through the windows, she spotted several more bikes arriving, their riders wearing the distinctive patches of the Desert Ravens enforcement crew. The saloon's atmosphere grew tenser as regular customers began quietly leaving, sensing the growing hostility. Even the tourist families, usually excited to experience an authentic Western saloon, picked up on the dangerous undercurrent and made their exits. "Maybe we should discuss this in private," Tom suggested, his eyes darting toward the parking lot where more bikes continued arriving. "Oh, I think right here's perfect." Switchblade's smile remained fixed, but his voice carried steel. "Let everyone see how reasonable we can be when businesses cooperate. Sarah here seems to need a demonstration of how things work in Thunder Valley now." Sarah maintained her professional composure while internally cataloging threats and exits. Her training, though she kept that part of her life carefully hidden, had taught her to read situations like this, to spot the telltale signs of impending violence. The way the Ravens were positioning themselves, the subtle hand signals between members, all pointed to this being more than simple intimidation. "Last week, some of our associates had trouble getting service here," Switchblade continued, his false politeness dropping slightly. "Sarah seemed to think she could refuse paying customers. That's not good for business, Tom. Not good at all. Your associates were harassing female customers, Sarah stated firmly, though her pulse quickened as she recognized the escalating danger. We don't allow that here. Never have. Times change, darling. Switchblade leaned closer, his cologne failing to mask the smell of leather and threat. Smart businesses adapt. Smart employees learn new rules. Your sister Annie, for instance, runs that nice little bookstore down the street. Would be a shame if something happened to all those vintage books she collects. Sarah's hand tightened imperceptibly on the glass she was wiping. The mention of her sister sent ice through her veins, but years of training kept her expression neutral. How did they know about Annie? She'd been careful to keep their connection quiet since moving to Thunder Valley. Through the windows, she noticed more ravens arriving, their bikes filling the parking lot. This wasn't their usual show of force. They were bringing in members from other chapters, preparing for something bigger than simple extortion. The Desert Ravens were making their move to take complete control of Thunder Valley, and the Dust Dancer Saloon was just one piece of their larger plan. What they didn't know, what Sarah had spent years ensuring no one in Thunder Valley knew, was that the pleasant, attractive bartender they were threatening had spent 6 years as part of the Marine Corps' most elite units. The skills she'd used hunting high-value targets across war zones hadn't faded. She'd just gotten better at hiding them behind a friendly smile and efficient service. Sarah kept her movements fluid and controlled as she placed another glass under the counter, years of training keeping her anxiety about Annie masked beneath practiced professionalism. Through the saloon's dust-flecked windows, she caught the flash of a familiar silhouette, Marcus Chen from Thunder Valley PD making another slow pass in his patrol car. His presence had become more frequent lately, but the Desert Ravens' growing influence had made even law enforcement cautious. A burly prospect wearing a Support 81 shirt approached the bar, his swagger betraying his eagerness to prove himself. "Boss wants a word with you after closing," he announced, attempting to loom over Sarah. "Says you need to understand how things work around here now." The saloon's weathered doors creaked open again as Daniel "Snake" Morrison, the Desert Ravens president, made his entrance. His leather cut bore patches that spoke of decades in the outlaw life, and his face carried the hard lines of someone used to taking what he wanted. The other bikers immediately shifted, creating a path for their leader. "Tommy boy," Snake called out, his gravelly voice carrying forced cheerfulness. "Time we discuss some new business arrangements. My accountant's been looking over property values along Route 66. Thinks the Dust Dancer would make a perfect addition to our entertainment portfolio." Tom Cooper emerged from behind the bar, his usual easygoing manner strained. "Snake, we've been over this. The Dust Dancer's been in my family for 3 generations. It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale." Snake's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just depends on motivation. Speaking of which, heard your insurance rates might be going up. Lot of accidents happening to businesses that don't understand progress." Sarah continued serving drinks, maintaining her cover while analyzing the situation. The Ravens were positioning members near all exits, their movements suggesting more than standard intimidation. Through years of combat experience, she recognized the telltale signs of an operation being staged. Her phone buzzed, a message from Annie about their weekly dinner plans. The normalcy of it struck a sharp contrast with the growing tension. Sarah had always kept her military background hidden, even from her sister. As far as Annie knew, those 6 years had been spent working private security overseas. The saloon's ancient jukebox crackled to life as one of the prospects fed it quarters, the opening notes of Bad to the Bone filling the space with calculated menace. Snake approached the bar, his weathered boots clicking against the wooden floor. "Sarah, isn't it?" He studied her with cold calculation. "Switchblade tells me you've been reluctant to embrace our new business model. That's disappointing. We value community cooperation here in Thunder Valley." "Just trying to do my job," Sarah responded evenly, her hand steady as she poured another drink. "Keeping the peace, serving customers." "Peace is exactly what we provide," Snake's voice carried an edge of steel. "For a reasonable fee, of course. Your sister's bookstore, for instance. Lot of flammable inventory there. Be a shame if something sparked." The threat to Annie crystallized something in Sarah's mind. She'd moved to Thunder Valley seeking quiet, trying to leave behind the violence she'd seen overseas. But some skills never faded, like noting how Snake's lieutenant was coordinating with someone through an earpiece, or how the prospects were systematically photographing the saloon's layout. The bar's door opened again as more ravens entered, these wearing patches from chapters across 3 states. Sarah recognized the telltale signs of ex-military among them, the way they moved, how they assessed sightlines and choke points. This wasn't just about the Dust Dancer. They were staging something bigger. "Found something interesting while looking into your background," Snake continued, his casual tone belied by predatory eyes. "Seems you just appeared in Thunder Valley 2 years ago. No history, no connections except that sister of yours. Makes a man curious about what someone might be running from." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though internally her combat instincts were surging. They'd been investigating her, but clearly hadn't dug deep enough to find her military records. Those had been carefully buried when she'd transitioned to civilian life, helped by contacts who understood the value of staying off the grid. "Nothing interesting to find," she maintained her cover story. "Just moved here for the quiet life like lots of folks do." "See, I think there's more to it." Snake leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Think maybe you've got secrets worth knowing. And I know just how to motivate people to share secrets." Through the windows, Sarah noticed more bikes arriving, their riders carrying patches from the Ravens Enforcement Division. The presence of out-of-state chapters confirmed her suspicions. This was more than simple extortion. They were preparing for something major, using the Dust Dancer as part of a larger operation. What they didn't realize was that their target had spent years hunting high-value targets across war zones, reading patterns just like this. The Desert Ravens were moving pieces into place, but they'd chosen the wrong person to threaten. Sarah had sworn to leave violence behind, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd threatened Annie. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her sister about dinner plans. The mundane normalcy of it almost made Sarah smile, even as she calculated angles and positions, noting which ravens carried concealed weapons, identifying potential improvised weapons behind the bar. They thought they were dealing with a simple bartender, not someone who'd led specialized units through operations that officially never happened. "Think carefully about your next few shifts," Snake straightened, adjusting his cut. "We'll be implementing some changes around here. Cooperation makes everything easier. Resistance." He glanced toward the window where Annie's bookstore was visible down the street. Well, resistance tends to have unfortunate consequences. Sarah waited until the last of the ravens rumbled away from the Dust Dancer, their bikes echoing through the desert night. Only then did she let out a controlled breath, the kind she'd used during long-range operations when steadying her aim. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Annie about their dinner plans, this one mentioning a new rare book acquisition. Looking at her sister's innocent text about vintage novels, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the Ravens' operation than simple intimidation. The small red light of the newly installed security camera blinked in the corner, recording everything. Sarah had noticed its installation last week, supposedly part of the Ravens' security upgrades for local businesses. But something about its positioning, the way it was angled to capture the bar's operations rather than protect it, had triggered her combat instincts. 200 miles away, in a secured facility outside Las Vegas, Captain Maya Rodriguez studied the security footage of Sarah's confrontation with the Desert Ravens. Her desk was sparse except for 3 monitors displaying different angles of the saloon encounter. 2 years of deep surveillance tracking the Ravens' operations across 3 states, and now their carefully constructed case was at risk because they'd targeted her former team leader. "They're moving faster than anticipated." Lieutenant James Foster leaned against her desk, his FBI credentials hanging loosely around his neck. Snake doesn't usually get personally involved in small-town operations. Something's pushing their timeline. Maya pulled up a complex network of data showing business acquisitions along Route 66. They're using the Dust Dancer as a distribution point, but that's not their main play. Look at the pattern of properties they're acquiring. Back in Thunder Valley, Sarah started her closing routine, the weight of Snake's threats sitting heavy in her mind. The saloon was quieter than usual, regular customers still spooked by the Raven's show of force. Through methodical observation, she'd spotted what others had missed: the way certain bikers carried themselves, their tactical positioning, the coordinated communications. These weren't ordinary outlaws. Some of them had military training. "Quite a show tonight." Tom Cooper's voice carried barely controlled fear as he counted the register. "Never seen Snake bring in members from other chapters just for a protection talk." "They're setting up something bigger," Sarah replied while wiping down tables, maintaining her cover while analyzing patterns. 3 more bike chapters had arrived in the past week, all with suspiciously new patches and military-grade communication equipment. Tom pulled her aside, checking carefully before speaking. "Ravens are implementing new management protocols tomorrow. Direct orders from Snake. All inventory, scheduling, everything goes through their people first." Sarah recognized the strategy. They were creating a paper trail, establishing legitimate business control to hide whatever operation they were really running. The same tactics she'd seen militant groups use to conceal weapons shipments behind legitimate commerce. "Be careful, Sarah." Tom's voice dropped lower. "I've seen what happens to people who resist them. 3 business owners sold their properties last month and disappeared. Their paperwork was perfect, all properly notarized and witnessed." The shift progressed with tense rhythm as Sarah documented everything she noticed, keeping her observations hidden in a secure app on her phone. A customer arrived with suspicious bruises, his expensive watch and fearful glances suggesting connections to the Ravens' operation. Through careful observation, she began mapping their command structure, identifying key players and potential weaknesses. "Just came by to check the new security system," a Raven prospect announced during her break, his obvious surveillance barely hidden behind technical adjustments. Sarah noticed how he photographed the bar's layout while pretending to work on the cameras. "Sarah, dear," Snake's voice carried across the empty saloon as she prepared to leave. She hadn't heard him enter, the first time anyone had managed to surprise her since combat training. "About your recent reluctance to embrace change. The board of directors, that's what we're calling our chapter presidents now, feels your attitude doesn't align with our business vision." "Just doing my job," Sarah maintained her cover, though her combat instincts were screaming. She caught a glimpse of Annie's bookstore through the window, its closed sign illuminated by streetlights. "Everything's a job." Snake's smile remained fixed, but his eyes held warning. "Your sister's store, for instance, such important work, preserving literary history, would be tragic if something happened to all those irreplaceable books." At a secure facility in Las Vegas, Maya's team intercepted communications between Raven chapters. "They're gathering in force," Lieutenant Foster reported. "Multiple chapters converging on Thunder Valley. This isn't their usual operation pattern." Maya studied the surveillance data, her mind racing. They're not just using the saloon for distribution. The whole town's becoming their base of operations. But Sarah's refusal to cooperate is forcing them to accelerate their timeline. Back at the Dust Dancer, Sarah closed up for the night, her training helping maintain calm despite the growing danger. She didn't know that her former teammate was monitoring the situation, that Maya had spent 2 years building a case against the Desert Raven's criminal empire. All she knew was that her past, the skills she'd hoped to leave behind, might be the only thing that could protect her sister from what was coming. Through the saloon's windows, she watched more bikes arriving in town, their riders carrying patches from chapters across 3 states. The Desert Ravens were gathering strength, preparing for something big. But they'd made a critical error. They'd threatened the family of someone trained to dismantle entire militant organizations, someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of turning enemies' strengths into fatal weaknesses. Sarah's drive home took longer than usual, her training forcing her to run multiple counter-surveillance patterns to ensure she wasn't followed. The Desert Ravens had expanded their presence across Thunder Valley, their bikes now patrolling streets that had once been peaceful. Through her side mirrors, she caught glimpses of prospects tailing her, their inexperience at surveillance making them easy to spot. Her modest ranch house sat on the outskirts of town, chosen specifically for its defensive position and clear lines of sight. As she pulled into the driveway, she noticed fresh tire tracks in the dirt. Someone had been watching her home. The marks matched the custom tires favored by the Ravens Enforcement Division. Inside, Sarah moved directly to a hidden panel behind her bookshelf. The concealed safe contained one of the few connections to her past life, a secure satellite phone that connected directly to her former unit. She hadn't used it in 2 years, hoping to leave that world behind. But the Ravens' threats against Annie had changed everything. The phone powered on silently, its encryption protocols engaging automatically. Before she could send a message, it lit up with an incoming alert. Sparrow secure line active, priority message. I was wondering when you'd power up. Maya's voice came through, the familiar calm of her former teammate carrying years of shared combat experience. You've got company in Thunder Valley. How long have you been watching? Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. 2 years tracking the Desert Ravens expansion across 3 states, Maya replied. They're not just another outlaw club, Sarah. They're building something bigger, using legitimate businesses as cover for an operation that makes their usual gun running look small-time. Sarah moved through her house, checking security measures she'd installed but hoped never to need. They're threatening Annie. My sister's completely innocent in this, Maya. She doesn't even know about my service record. The Ravens don't care about innocent. Maya's voice hardened. They're eliminating anyone who might threaten their operation. 3 business owners who refused their protection disappeared last month. Their properties were transferred through perfect paperwork, all legally certified. A motorcycle rumbled past Sarah's house, its rider making no attempt to hide his surveillance. Through carefully positioned mirrors, she caught the patch on his cut. He was part of the Ravens' intelligence gathering crew, ex-military by his positioning and awareness. They're using Thunder Valley as a hub, Maya continued, sharing intel gathered over months of surveillance. The Dust Dancer's location makes it perfect. Historic site, steady tourist traffic, legitimate reason for constant shipments. But it's bigger than that. They're establishing control of the entire Route 66 corridor. Sarah's tactical training kicked in as she processed the information. The new cameras they're installing in local businesses, the paperwork they're requiring, they're creating a surveillance network. And a paper trail to make everything look legitimate, Maya confirmed. But something's changed. They're accelerating their timeline, bringing in operators from other chapters. Your resistance at the saloon threatens their whole operation. A secure data link pinged on Sarah's phone, Maya sharing intelligence files. The documents revealed a pattern Sarah recognized from her military days. The Ravens weren't just taking over businesses. They were establishing a complete shadow infrastructure along America's most iconic highway. 4 more chapters arrived today, Maya reported. These aren't ordinary bikers, Sarah. They're running it like a military operation. Some of their new members have training similar to ours. Sarah studied the files, her combat experience helping her see the larger strategy. The Ravens weren't just extorting local businesses. They were positioning to control an entire transportation corridor, using legitimate commerce as cover for something much darker. Snake's enforcer, Switchblade. He's ex-Special Forces, Maya continued. Most of their new recruits have tactical training. They're building something that looks like an outlaw club, but operates like a paramilitary organization. Through her window, Sarah spotted another bike making a slow pass. The rider's positioning and awareness confirmed Maya's intelligence. These weren't ordinary bikers. Their movements showed military precision, their surveillance patterns suggesting professional training. They tried accessing your service record, Maya's voice carried warning. Our block's held, but they know there's something hidden in your background. That's why Snake came personally. You're an unknown variable in their operation. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Annie, asking about dinner plans. The normalcy of it made her heart ache, knowing her sister had no idea of the danger surrounding them. I can't run, Maya. Annie's whole life is here, her store, her community. I won't let them take that from her. We've got a task force ready, Maya replied, but we need more evidence. The Ravens have politicians and judges in their pocket. We take them down, it has to be clean. No legal loopholes, no deniable connections. A vehicle approached Sarah's house, not a motorcycle this time, but a black SUV with tinted windows. Through her security setup, she watched it park down the street, its position giving clear observation of her property. "They're watching my house," Sarah reported, her tactical mind already calculating responses. Professional setup, not their usual prospects. "Snake's bringing in his elite crew," Maya confirmed. "Sarah, they don't just make people disappear. They stage accidents, make deaths look natural. Your father taught us both how effective that technique can be." The mention of their former commander, of his suspicious motorcycle accident 2 years after retiring, sent ice through Sarah's veins. "They're not touching Annie," she stated with quiet certainty. "Whatever it takes, Maya. I'm done hiding." "We'll help," Maya assured her. "But be careful. Snake's operation goes higher than just outlaw bikers. There are government contracts, classified shipments, people with real power protecting them." Through her security feeds, Sarah watched the SUV's occupants establishing surveillance positions. They were good, professional good, but she'd spent years hunting better. The Desert Ravens thought they were dealing with a simple bartender, not knowing they'd threatened the family of someone trained in dismantling entire organizations. "Time to remind them why we were called Force Recon," Sarah said quietly, her decision made. The skills she'd hoped to leave behind were about to become Thunder Valley's best defense against what was coming. Sarah's next shift at the Dust Dancer started with an undercurrent of tension that even the tourists could feel. The Ravens had stationed prospects at every major intersection in Thunder Valley, their presence turning the once peaceful desert town into an occupied territory. Through the saloon's windows, she watched 3 more SUVs arrive, their occupants carrying themselves with the unmistakable bearing of professional operators. "The board has some concerns about inventory management," Snake announced, emerging from Tom's office with a stack of papers. "We'll be implementing new tracking systems, special protocols for certain shipments. Progress requires proper documentation." Sarah maintained her professional demeanor while noting the changes. The Ravens weren't just taking over the saloon. They were establishing a complete control system, using legitimate business operations as cover for something much larger. "All shipments go through our security team first," Switchblade added, his ex-Special Forces training showing in how he positioned himself to watch both the main entrance and the back door. "Safety protocols, you understand. Lots of dangerous elements on the roads these days." Through her earpiece, carefully disguised as a standard Bluetooth device, Sarah heard Maya coordinating surveillance. 4 more Ravens arrived from their Nevada chapter. These guys aren't regular bikers. They're running communications equipment, professional-grade stuff. The saloon's afternoon rush brought a mix of tourists and locals, but Sarah noticed how the regulars were staying away. Through careful observation, she spotted 3 separate Ravens teams conducting surveillance, their movements suggesting military training rather than ordinary biker intimidation. "Your sister's got quite a collection," Snake commented casually during a quiet moment. "First editions, rare manuscripts, stuff that's hard to replace. Shame how often old books suffer water damage. All those sprinkler systems, so unpredictable." Sarah's hand tightened imperceptibly on the glass she was wiping. "The store's got good insurance," she replied evenly, though her combat instincts were surging. "Insurance." Snake's smile carried dark amusement. "Funny thing about insurance. Rates go up when accidents happen. Your sister might find it harder to maintain coverage, way things are changing in Thunder Valley." Maya's voice came through the earpiece. "They've got someone watching Annie's store. Professional setup, not their usual muscle." Sarah used the mirror behind the bar to study the Ravens' positions. Their tactical deployment was too precise for ordinary criminals. They were establishing a complete control grid across Thunder Valley, using businesses like the Dust Dancer as nodes in their network. "Got something," Maya reported. "Intercepted communications between Snake and someone high up. They're calling it Operation Ghost Road, using Route 66 businesses as cover for moving something big. The Dust Dancer's position makes it a perfect control point." Tom emerged from his office looking shaken, his usual confident manner completely gone. The Ravens' board meeting had clearly involved more than simple business discussion. "Sarah," his voice carried forced casualness, "they're implementing new inventory protocols tomorrow. All staff needs to attend a special training session." Training session. Switchblade smirked from his position near the door. Consider it professional development. Lots of opportunities for advancement in our organization. Through the windows, Sarah spotted more bikes arriving, these carrying patches from chapters across 4 states. The Ravens weren't just gathering strength, they were positioning assets for something major. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north, Maya warned through the earpiece. Professional security teams, not bikers. They're setting up a perimeter around Thunder Valley. Sarah continued serving drinks while analyzing the situation. The Ravens had transformed from an outlaw motorcycle club into something more dangerous, a paramilitary organization using legitimate businesses as cover for an operation that stretched across state lines. Your background check came back interesting, Snake mentioned later, his voice carrying calculated threat. Lot of blank spots in your history. Makes a man wonder what someone might be hiding. Nothing to hide, Sarah maintained her cover. Just a simple bartender. Simple bartenders don't move like you do, Snake's eyes carried cold assessment. Don't maintain situational awareness like you do. Been watching you, Sarah. Way you check sight lines, monitor exits. That's not civilian training. Maya's voice came through with urgency. They're accelerating something. Just intercepted orders for their Nevada chapters to move to full operational status. The saloon's evening crowd thinned out as more Ravens arrived, their presence becoming increasingly militant rather than merely criminal. Sarah noticed how they were positioning teams at strategic points throughout Thunder Valley, establishing a control grid that went far beyond simple territory marking. Think about your sister's future, Snake suggested as he prepared to leave. Lots of accidents can happen to small businesses. Electrical fires, inventory damage, personal injury. World's a dangerous place without proper protection. Through carefully controlled movements, Sarah continued her work while processing the escalating situation. The Desert Ravens had transformed Thunder Valley into a forward operating base, using legitimate businesses as cover for an operation that threatened everything and everyone she cared about. Sarah, Maya's voice carried warning. We just intercepted more communications. They're not just threatening Annie's store, they're planning to use it. Something about specialized shipping requirements and literary cover packages. They're going to force her into their operation whether she cooperates or not. The thought of Annie being pulled into the Ravens' world, into the kind of violence Sarah had spent years trying to leave behind, crystallized something in her mind. She'd moved to Thunder Valley seeking peace, but some fights couldn't be avoided. The Desert Ravens thought they were dealing with a simple bartender, not knowing they'd threatened the family of someone trained to dismantle entire organizations from the inside out. Through the saloon's windows, she watched more professional security teams arriving, their vehicles and equipment suggesting serious financial backing. Whatever the Ravens were planning, it went far beyond ordinary criminal enterprise. They were building something bigger, something that threatened not just Thunder Valley, but the entire Route 66 corridor. The evening shift turned intense as Sarah spotted Switchblade accessing Tom's office computer, his movement suggesting he was uploading something to the Ravens network. Through her earpiece, Maya provided constant updates on the expanding operation. The Ravens weren't just taking over the Dust Dancer, they were establishing a sophisticated control system across multiple states. Multiple teams moving into position, Maya reported. They've got surveillance units covering every major intersection in Thunder Valley. These aren't regular bikers, Sarah. They're running a military-grade operation. Sarah maintained her professional routine while processing the information. Years of combat experience helped her identify the telltale signs, the way certain Ravens moved, their communication patterns, the professional quality of their equipment. This went far beyond ordinary organized crime. Got something. Maya's voice carried controlled urgency. Intercepted communications about Operation Ghost Road. They're using historical sites along Route 66 as cover for moving something big. The Dust Dancer's not just a distribution point. It's a command and control center. Through the saloon's windows, Sarah watched more SUVs arriving, their occupants carrying themselves with unmistakable military bearing. The Ravens had evolved from an outlaw motorcycle club into something more dangerous, a paramilitary organization with serious backing. Your father would be proud, Snake's voice carried across the empty bar as closing time approached. The casual mention of her father sent ice through Sarah's veins. Robert Mitchell, Force Recon decorated commander, died in that tragic motorcycle accident 2 years after retirement. Brake failure, wasn't it? Sarah's hand froze imperceptibly on the glass she was cleaning. They'd found her real background, or at least part of it. Through her earpiece, she heard Maya's sharp intake of breath. Funny thing about military families, Snake continued, studying her reaction. Tends to run in the blood. Father serves, children follow. Makes me wonder what exactly you did during those missing years in your history. Sarah, Maya's voice carried warning. They've accessed part of your service record. The blocks held on the classified missions, but they know about your father. They're trying to force you into the open. Snake approached the bar, his movement carrying predatory grace. Your father was investigating something when he died. Something about irregular shipments along transport corridors. Professional man, kept detailed records, right until that unfortunate brake failure. The revelation hit Sarah hard. Her father's death, the accident that had driven her deeper into classified operations, hadn't been random. Through carefully controlled movements, she continued her closing routine while processing this new information. He was getting close to something, Snake revealed, watching her carefully. Something big enough that certain interests couldn't risk exposure, just like you're getting close to something now, asking questions about our business operations. Just trying to do my job, Sarah maintained her cover, though her combat instincts were screaming. Your father said the same thing. Snake's smile carried dark amusement. Right until the end. Professional man, believed in proper procedures, thought documentation and evidence could protect him. Maya's voice came through with urgency. Sarah, we've got movement. Multiple Ravens teams mobilizing across Thunder Valley. They're implementing some kind of lockdown protocol. Through the windows, Sarah watched more bikes arriving, their riders carrying patches from chapters across 5 states. The Ravens weren't just gathering strength, they were preparing for something major. Found something interesting in your father's old files, Snake continued, revealing more of what they knew. Mission reports, operational protocols. Man was thorough about documenting everything, including certain shipping routes that interested him, routes that seem relevant to our current business expansion. Sarah's tactical training helped her maintain composure while analyzing the situation. The Ravens hadn't just killed her father. They'd used his own intelligence against them, learned from his investigation to build something bigger. He was right, you know. Snake's voice carried almost respectful menace. About the potential of using historical routes for specialized transportation. Old roads, tourist attractions, perfect cover for certain types of commerce. Your father saw the pattern, just like you're seeing patterns now. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east, Maya reported. Professional security teams setting up a perimeter around Thunder Valley. They're isolating the town. Snake moved closer, his voice dropping. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop asking questions, stop noticing things. Your sister's store is going to handle some special inventory for us. Books make excellent cover for certain types of shipments. The mention of Annie sparked something in Sarah's mind. The Ravens weren't just threatening her sister. They were planning to use her business as part of their operation. Your father made things complicated, Snake continued. Forced certain measures that could have been avoided. Don't make us solve another Mitchell family problem the same way. Through her earpiece, Maya's voice carried controlled fury. They're admitting to killing your father, Sarah, using it to threaten you. We've got it recorded. First solid evidence linking them to his death. Sarah noticed movement in the parking lot. More Ravens arriving, but these carried themselves differently. Their positioning, their equipment, everything suggested serious military training. Think about your choices, Snake advised as he prepared to leave. Your father chose wrong. Cost him everything, and he doesn't need to face the same situation. Through carefully controlled movements, Sarah continued her work while processing the revelation about her father's death. The Desert Ravens had killed him for investigating their operation, and now they were threatening to do the same to his daughters. Sarah, Maya's voice carried quiet strength. We've got enough to move on them. Your father's death, their admission, it gives us cause. But we need more evidence about their current operation. They've got too many powerful people protecting them. The pieces started falling into place in Sarah's mind. Her father had discovered their operation years ago, tried to expose it through legitimate channels. Now his daughters were facing the same threat, but this time they had the training and resources to fight back. Through the saloon's windows, she watched the Ravens transforming Thunder Valley into their forward operating base. They thought they were dealing with a simple bartender, never realizing they'd just admitted to killing the wrong family's father. Sarah returned home that night to find her security feeds compromised. The Ravens surveillance team had attempted to hack her system, not realizing her setup was far beyond civilian grade. Through encrypted channels, Maya confirmed what Sarah already suspected. The Ravens were systematically gathering intelligence on everyone connected to their operation. They've got teams watching both you and Annie, Maya reported. Professional surveillance, not their usual muscle. These guys have training similar to what we used in Force Recon. Sarah accessed her hidden gun safe, the biometric lock responding silently to her touch. Inside lay the tools of her former life, weapons and equipment that hadn't seen use since she'd left the service. The familiar weight of her tactical gear brought back memories of operations that officially never happened. Your father's files just decoded, Maya's voice carried through her secure line. He'd encrypted everything before his death, hidden it in plain sight. The Ravens didn't just kill him for investigating them. They used his intelligence to build something bigger. Sarah reviewed the decoded files, her tactical training helping her see the patterns her father had uncovered. The Ravens weren't just running guns or drugs. They were establishing a complete shadow infrastructure along America's most iconic highway. Route 66 wasn't random, Maya explained. Your father figured it out. Historical sites, tourist attractions, legitimate businesses. Perfect cover for moving things that can't go through normal channels. The Dust Dancer's just one node in their network. Through her security feeds, Sarah spotted the Ravens surveillance team changing shifts. Their procedure was textbook military: precise timing, proper communications, professional execution. These weren't ordinary criminals. They were trained operators working under deep cover. Found something else, Maya's voice tightened. Your father wasn't just investigating their shipping routes. He uncovered connections to classified military contracts, government black sites, operations that officially don't exist. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Annie, asking about their weekly dinner plans. The normalcy of it struck hard against the growing reality of their situation. Her sister had no idea that her bookstore was about to become part of an operation that had already killed their father. Multiple teams deploying across Thunder Valley, Maya reported. They're establishing a complete control grid. Security cameras, communication monitoring, movement tracking. They're turning the whole town into a forward operating base. Sarah's tactical mind processed the implications. The Ravens weren't just threatening her family. They were building something that threatened entire communities along Route 66. Her father had died trying to expose them through legitimate channels. Now his daughters would have to find another way. Got more decoded files, Maya continued. Your father documented everything: shipping manifests, financial transactions, personnel movements. He built a complete case showing how they use historical businesses as cover. Through her window, Sarah spotted another SUV parking down the street. The occupant's behavior confirmed Maya's intelligence. These were professional operators, not ordinary bikers. The Ravens had evolved into something far more dangerous than an outlaw motorcycle club. They're planning something big, Maya's voice carried warning. Snakes called in assets from 6 different states. Professional operators, ex-military intelligence backgrounds. They're preparing for a major operation. Sarah accessed her father's files, seeing the operation through his eyes. He'd uncovered a pattern of businesses being acquired along Route 66, each one strategically positioned for moving unauthorized cargo. The Dust Dancer's location made it perfect, a historic saloon with legitimate reason for constant deliveries. Your father knew they'd kill him, Maya said quietly. That's why he encrypted everything. hid it where they wouldn't look. He knew his daughters would understand the patterns, see what he'd uncovered. Through her security system, Sarah watched the Ravens surveillance team photographing her house, documenting entry points and security measures. Their professionalism confirmed what Maya had reported. These weren't ordinary criminals, but trained operators with serious backing. They're accelerating their timeline, Maya reported. Something's pushed them to move faster. Your resistance at the saloon combined with Annie's strategic location. They're not waiting anymore. Sarah's combat training kicked in as she processed the situation. The Ravens, properly positioned for maximum coverage, almost like someone with tactical training designed it. Sarah kept her movements casual while noting the Ravens' positions. Their operators had taken up strategic points throughout the saloon, their placement suggesting preparation for serious action. Your father was thorough, Snake continued, his voice carrying calculated menace. Documented every shipment, every transaction, created a perfect record of our early operations, helped us improve our methods after we solved our security problem. Through encrypted channels, Maya shared more decoded files. Your father mapped their entire command structure, identified connections to classified military operations, government contracts. That's why they killed him. He could prove how high this goes. Sarah spotted movement outside, more Ravens arriving, but these carried themselves differently. Their equipment and positioning suggested special operations background, not ordinary criminal muscle. Annie's store provides perfect cover, Snake mentioned casually. Rare books, specialized shipping requirements, ideal for certain types of cargo. Your father would appreciate the elegance of using legitimate commerce as cover. The mention of both her father and sister sent ice through Sarah's veins, but years of combat training kept her expression neutral. Through careful observation, she noticed the Ravens operators communicating through concealed military-grade radio systems. Got something big, Maya reported urgently. Intercepted communications about Operation Ghost Road. They're using historical businesses along Route 66 for classified military shipments. The Dust Dancer and Annie's store are key points in their network. Snake's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. His reaction, though subtle, suggested something had changed in their timeline. Implement final protocols, he ordered his operators. Full integration of all designated sites within 48 hours. Sarah continued her work while processing the implications. The Ravens weren't just threatening her family. They were about to pull Annie into an operation that had already killed their father. Multiple teams moving into position, Maya warned. They're not waiting anymore. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. Through the saloon's windows, Sarah watched more professional operators arriving, their movements suggesting preparation for major action. The Ravens had transformed Thunder Valley into their forward operating base, using legitimate businesses as cover for something far darker than ordinary crime. Your father's last message just decoded. Maya's voice carried quiet fury. He knew they were coming for him. Left everything we need to expose their whole operation, if we can prove it without getting killed like he was. Sarah's tactical mind processed everything she'd learned. The Ravens had killed her father for documenting their operation, then used his intelligence to build something bigger. Now they were threatening his daughters, not realizing they'd inherited more than just his stubbornness. Through careful observation, she spotted the Ravens' surveillance teams establishing new positions throughout Thunder Valley. They thought they were dealing with a simple bartender and her bookstore owner sister. They had no idea they'd threatened the family of the man who'd nearly exposed their entire operation, or that his daughters had the training to finish what he'd started. Sarah's shift at the Dust Dancer took a darker turn as the Ravens began implementing their final protocols. Their operators moved with military precision, installing additional surveillance equipment and securing strategic positions throughout the saloon. Through her earpiece, Maya provided constant updates on their expanding operation. They're moving heavy equipment into Annie's store after hours, Maya reported. Shipping containers, specialized storage units, all disguised as rare book preservation equipment. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. Sarah maintained her cover while observing the Ravens' activities. Their professional operators had completely replaced the regular prospects, transforming Thunder Valley from a peaceful desert town into a militarized zone. Through careful observation, she spotted their teams establishing command and control points across the area. Your father's final files revealed their entire operation. Maya's voice carried controlled urgency. Route 66 isn't just a smuggling route. It's a classified military supply line disguised as tourist attractions. The Ravens provide deniable cover for government black ops. Switchblade coordinated with his teams, their movements suggesting imminent action. All personnel implement Security Protocol 7, he ordered through their encrypted communications. Full integration of designated sites begins at 2300 hours. Sarah recognized the military terminology. These weren't bikers playing soldier, but trained operators using an outlaw club as cover. Through the saloon's windows, she watched more tactical teams arriving, their equipment suggesting serious combat capability. Got movement at the command center, Maya warned. Snake's mobilizing all available units. Something's accelerated their timeline. They're not waiting for full setup anymore. Tom emerged from his office looking pale, his usual confident manner completely gone. The Ravens' security briefing had clearly involved more than simple business discussion. Sarah, his voice shook slightly. They're implementing new protocols tonight. All staff needs to clear out by 8. Clearing the area for operational security, Maya analyzed. Standard procedure before major military action. They're preparing for something big. Snake entered with his elite enforcement team, their movements suggesting extensive combat experience. Impressive how you maintain awareness, he commented, watching Sarah's reactions. Always checking exits, monitoring positions, just like your father taught you. Sarah kept her movements casual while noting the operators' positions. Their tactical gear, partially concealed under civilian clothes, confirmed Maya's intelligence about their military connections. Got something critical, Maya reported through the secure channel. Just decoded your father's last surveillance files. The Ravens aren't just using Route 66 for smuggling, they're establishing a complete shadow infrastructure for classified military operations. Tourist sites provide perfect cover for secure facilities. Snake coordinated with his teams, their communications suggesting final preparation phases. Your father documented everything perfectly, he mentioned, studying Sarah's response. Created a complete template for using historical businesses as operational cover. We just improved on his research after solving our security issue. Through encrypted channels, Maya shared more intelligence. Multiple Ravens teams deploying across 3 states. They're activating their entire network simultaneously. Whatever they're planning, it's bigger than just Thunder Valley. Sarah spotted movement outside. More tactical teams arriving, their equipment suggesting special operations background. The Ravens had evolved far beyond an outlaw motorcycle club, becoming something more dangerous than her father could have imagined. Annie's location is strategic, Snake continued, his casual tone belying the threat. Rare book shipments provide perfect cover for specialized cargo. High-value items requiring careful handling. Your father would appreciate the operational elegance. The mention of both Annie and their father sent Sarah's combat instincts into high alert, but years of training kept her expression neutral. Through careful observation, she noticed the Ravens operators setting up advanced communications equipment disguised as normal business systems. Breaking news, Maya's voice carried urgent warning. Intercepted orders for Operation Ghost Road. They're activating their entire Route 66 network. The Dust Dancer and Annie's store aren't just distribution points, they're forward operating bases for classified military operations. Snake received an encrypted message, his reaction suggesting significant developments. Implement final phase, he ordered his teams. Full integration of all designated sites begins immediately. No more civilian presence after 2000 hours. Sarah processed the implications while maintaining her cover. The Ravens weren't just threatening Thunder Valley. They were about to activate a military-grade operation using historical businesses as cover for classified activities. Multiple tactical teams moving into position, Maya warned. They're securing all key locations in Thunder Valley. This isn't just about controlling businesses anymore. They're establishing a complete military infrastructure. Through the saloon's windows, Sarah watched more professional operators arriving, their movements suggesting imminent action. The Ravens had transformed from criminal enterprise to something far more dangerous, a paramilitary organization using legitimate businesses for classified government operations. "Your father's final message decoded," Maya reported quietly. "He didn't just document their smuggling operations. He uncovered a classified military program using civilian businesses as cover. That's why they killed him. He could expose connections that went straight to Washington." Sarah's tactical training helped her analyze the situation. The Ravens had killed her father for documenting their operation, then used his intelligence to build something even bigger. Now they were threatening his daughters, not realizing they'd inherited more than just his investigative skills. Through careful observation, she spotted the Ravens' tactical teams establishing final positions throughout Thunder Valley. They thought they were dealing with a simple bartender and her bookstore owner's sister. They had no idea they'd threatened the daughters of the man who'd nearly exposed their entire operation, or that his children had the training to finish what he'd started. "Remember what he taught us," Maya said quietly through the secure channel. "Sometimes the best way to expose corruption isn't through direct confrontation, it's through careful documentation and precise timing." Sarah watched the Ravens' final preparations through the Dust Dancer's windows as their operation shifted into high gear. Their tactical teams had completely secured Thunder Valley, transforming the quiet desert town into a militarized zone. Through her earpiece, Maya coordinated their response from the secure facility. "Multiple teams moving into final positions," Maya reported. "They're activating their entire Route 66 network. This isn't just about Thunder Valley anymore. It's a full-scale military operation using civilian businesses as cover." Sarah maintained her professional demeanor while observing the Ravens' activities. Their operators moved with practiced precision, their actions suggesting extensive combat experience. Through careful observation, she spotted their command and control elements establishing secure communications throughout the area. "Your father's last intelligence file just decoded." Maya's voice carried controlled urgency. "He didn't just document their smuggling operation. He uncovered a classified military program using historical sites as cover for black ops. The Ravens provide deniable civilian presence for government operations." Snake entered the saloon with his elite team, their movements suggesting imminent action. "Interesting thing about military families," he commented, watching Sarah's reactions. "Certain skills get passed down. Attention to detail, tactical awareness. Your father taught you well." Sarah kept her motions casual while noting the operators' positions. Their equipment, partially concealed under civilian clothes, confirmed Maya's intelligence about their special operations backgrounds. "Critical update," Maya warned through the secure channel. "Just intercepted orders for Phase 0. They're converting the entire Route 66 corridor into a classified military supply line. Tourist businesses provide perfect cover for secure facilities and equipment storage." Switchblade coordinated with his teams, their communications suggesting final preparation stages. "All units confirm positions," he ordered through encrypted channels. "Full activation begins at midnight. No civilian presence in designated areas after 2200 hours." Sarah recognized the military protocols. These weren't ordinary criminals, but trained operators using an outlaw motorcycle club as cover for classified operations. Through the saloon's windows, she watched more tactical teams arriving, their gear suggesting serious combat capability. "Movement at Annie's store," Maya reported urgently. "Raven's teams are installing specialized equipment disguised as book preservation systems. They're turning it into a secure communications hub." Tom emerged from his office, his face ashen after another security briefing with Snake's people. "Sarah," he whispered, "they're not just taking over businesses, they're transforming the whole town. Military-grade security, restricted areas, classified protocols. Standard procedure for converting civilian sites to military use," Maya analyzed. "They're establishing a complete shadow infrastructure under tourist business cover." Snake coordinated with his elite enforcement unit, their movements suggesting extensive combat experience. "Your father understood operational security," he mentioned, studying Sarah's response. "Documented everything perfectly. helped us improve our methods after we resolved our personnel issue. Through encrypted channels, Maya shared critical intelligence. Multiple Ravens teams deploying nationwide. They're activating secure facilities disguised as historical businesses across the entire Route 66 corridor. Sarah spotted movement outside, more tactical teams arriving, their equipment suggesting special operations background. The Ravens had evolved far beyond an outlaw motorcycle club, becoming a sophisticated military operation using civilian businesses as cover. Annie's position is perfect, Snake continued, his casual tone masking the threat. Rare books require special handling, secure storage, discreet shipping, ideal cover for certain types of equipment. Your father would appreciate the strategic elegance. The combined mention of Annie and their father sent Sarah's combat instincts into high alert, but years of training kept her expression neutral. Through careful observation, she noticed the Ravens operators setting up advanced surveillance systems disguised as normal security cameras. Breaking update, Maya's voice carried urgent warning. Operation Ghost Road isn't just about smuggling. It's a classified military program using historical sites for covert operations. The Dust Dancer and Annie's store are being converted into forward operating bases. Snake received an encrypted message, his reaction suggesting significant developments. Implement final protocol, he ordered his teams. Full activation of all designated sites begins now. Secure all strategic positions and eliminate potential complications. Sarah processed the implications while maintaining her cover. The Ravens weren't just threatening Thunder Valley. They were about to activate a military-grade operation using historical businesses as cover for classified government activities. Multiple tactical teams securing perimeter, Maya warned. They're locking down Thunder Valley completely. This isn't just about controlling businesses anymore. They're establishing a classified military installation disguised as a tourist town. Through the saloon's windows, Sarah watched more professional operators arriving, their movements suggesting imminent action. The Ravens had transformed from criminal enterprise to something far more dangerous, a paramilitary organization providing civilian cover for classified government operations. Found your father's final warning, Maya reported quietly. He discovered they weren't just smuggling contraband. They were establishing a nationwide network of covert military facilities disguised as tourist attractions. That's why they killed him. He could expose their entire shadow infrastructure. Sarah's tactical training helped her analyze the situation. The Ravens had killed her father for documenting their operation, then used his intelligence to build something even more sophisticated. Now they were threatening his daughters, not realizing they'd inherited more than just his investigative skills. They're moving faster than anticipated, Maya warned. Whatever they're planning, it's happening tonight. All their teams are in final positions. Sarah watched the Ravens' tactical teams establishing complete control over Thunder Valley. They thought they were dealing with a simple bartender and her bookstore owner's sister. They had no idea they'd threatened the daughters of the man who'd nearly exposed their entire operation, or that his children had the training to finish what he'd started. Ready? Maya asked through the secure channel, their father's decoded files providing everything they needed to expose the entire operation. Ready, Sarah confirmed quietly, preparing to use everything their father had taught them about exposing corruption through careful documentation and precise timing. Sarah's moment came as Snake's teams prepared to activate their final protocols. The Ravens had transformed Thunder Valley into a militarized zone, their operators securing every strategic position in preparation for full activation. Through her earpiece, Maya coordinated their counter-operation. All Ravens teams are in position, Maya reported. They're initiating Operation Ghost Road across the entire Route 66 corridor. Whatever they're activating, it's happening now. Sarah maintained her bartender cover while implementing their plan. Years of combat training had taught her that timing was everything, just as their father had documented in his final files. Through careful observation, she watched the Ravens' tactical teams making their final preparations. Critical intel from your father's last decode. Maya's voice carried controlled urgency. He didn't just map their smuggling routes. He identified every classified facility disguised as a tourist site, The entire Route 66 corridor is being converted into a covert military supply line. Snake entered the saloon with his elite enforcement unit, their movement suggesting immediate action. "Time to show you what real progress looks like," he announced, watching Sarah's reactions. "Your father died protecting old systems. Tonight we implement something more efficient." Sarah kept her motions casual while activating the hidden systems she'd installed throughout the Dust Dancer. Every camera, every microphone carefully positioned to document the Raven's operation, just as her father had taught her. Multiple teams moving to secure designated sites, Maya warned through the secure channel. "They're converting civilian businesses into classified military facilities. Annie's store is being transformed into a communications hub." Switchblade coordinated with his operators, their communications suggesting final preparation stages. "All units confirm ready status," he ordered through encrypted channels. "Full system activation begins on my mark. Secure all strategic positions and eliminate potential security risks." Sarah recognized the military protocols. These weren't ordinary criminals, but trained operators implementing a classified government program. Through the saloon's windows, she watched more tactical teams arriving, their equipment suggesting serious combat capability. "Your father's final files are uploading to secure servers," Maya reported. "Everything he documented about their operation, every facility, every connection to classified programs, we're broadcasting it to multiple federal agencies simultaneously." Tom emerged from his office, his face showing recognition of what was coming. The Raven's security briefing had revealed more than they intended. "Sarah," he whispered, "they're not just taking over businesses. They're implementing some kind of military protocol." "Confirmation received," Maya analyzed. "Federal agencies are receiving your father's files. The evidence is spreading faster than they can contain it." Snake coordinated with his elite enforcement unit, their movements suggesting extensive combat experience. "Your father was efficient," he mentioned, studying Sarah's response. "Documented everything perfectly. Helped us improve our methods after we resolved our security problem." Through encrypted channels, Maya shared critical updates. "Raven's teams are starting to receive alerts. Someone in their command structure has noticed the data breach. They know something's happening." Sarah spotted movement outside, more tactical teams arriving, but their organized movements were beginning to show signs of confusion. The Raven's carefully coordinated operation was starting to fragment as their classified connections were exposed. "What did you do?" Snake's voice carried dangerous recognition as alerts began flooding their communication channels. "What kind of signal is being broadcast from this location?" The facade of casual threat disappeared from his tone as he realized what was happening. Through careful observation, Sarah watched the Raven's organized operation begin to unravel as years of classified intelligence became public. "Federal teams are moving into position." Maya's voice carried satisfied warning. "They can't ignore this level of evidence. Your father's documentation is forcing them to act." Snake received urgent messages from multiple channels, his reaction showing growing recognition of their situation. "Lock down all facilities," he ordered his teams. "Secure every location and eliminate all potential leaks. Start with the bartender and her sister." Sarah maintained her position while watching their plan unfold. The Ravens weren't just being exposed. Their entire shadow infrastructure was being revealed through carefully documented evidence. "Multiple federal agencies responding," Maya reported. "They can't maintain cover with this level of exposure. The classified programs are being shut down across the entire Route 66 corridor." Through the saloon's windows, Sarah watched the Ravens' professional operation dissolve into chaos. Their tactical teams began receiving conflicting orders as their command structure fragmented under federal scrutiny. "Your father's final message is broadcasting," Maya said quietly. Everything he discovered about their classified operations, every connection he documented. They can't stop it from spreading now. Snake's composed demeanor cracked as he realized the full scope of what was happening. The classified military operation he'd built using the Ravens as cover was being systematically exposed through years of carefully gathered intelligence. "Like father," Like daughters, Sarah finally spoke, dropping her bartender facade. He taught us that the best way to fight corruption isn't through violence, it's through careful documentation and precise timing. The Ravens tactical teams began receiving evacuation orders as federal agencies moved to secure their classified facilities. The shadow infrastructure they'd built along Route 66 was being exposed exactly as Sarah's father had planned. Federal teams entering Thunder Valley, Maya reported with satisfaction. The Ravens can't maintain their cover story with this level of evidence. Their entire operation is being dismantled. Sarah watched as the Ravens' carefully constructed military operation collapsed under the weight of exposed, classified intelligence. They had killed her father for documenting their operation, never realizing his daughters would use everything he'd taught them to finish what he started. "It's over, Snake," Sarah stated calmly, years of combat training evident in her stance. "Every facility, every classified connection, every piece of evidence my father gathered. It's all public now, just like he planned." The Dust Dancer Saloon buzzed with activity as federal agents processed evidence from the Ravens operation. 2 months after Snake's arrest, Sarah watched through the windows as the last of the tactical team's equipment was removed from Thunder Valley. The town was returning to its peaceful desert nature, though now with a deeper understanding of what their father had died protecting. "Final reports coming in," Maya announced, joining her former teammate at the bar. "Every facility they converted along Route 66 has been exposed. The classified programs are being shut down, their government connections severed." Sarah continued her work at the saloon, though now without the need for cover. The skills she'd honed in combat had served a different purpose, helping complete their father's mission to expose corruption through careful documentation rather than violence. "Your father would be proud," Tom mentioned, his confidence restored now that the Ravens' influence was gone. "He always said the best weapon against corruption was proper documentation. Guess he taught his daughters well." Through the windows, Sarah watched Annie's bookstore returning to normal operations. Her sister had been shocked to learn the truth about their father's death, about Sarah's military background, but had shown the same strength that ran in the Mitchell family. "Multiple indictments coming down today," Maya reported, reviewing secure updates. "Snake's entire organization exposed, their classified contracts canceled. The evidence your father gathered, combined with what we documented, it's dismantling their whole network." Sarah noticed Officer Chen making his regular patrol, though now without the tension that had marked police presence during the Ravens' control. The law enforcement community had been stunned to discover the scope of classified operations hidden behind the outlaw motorcycle club's facade. "They found more of your father's files," Maya continued, sharing intelligence updates. "He'd hidden evidence across multiple locations, knowing they'd eventually kill him. Made sure his daughters would recognize the patterns when the time came." Annie entered the saloon, carrying a rare book she'd found in her store's inventory. The sisters' weekly dinners had taken on new meaning since the truth about their family legacy had been revealed. "Dad's old journal was hidden in a false cover," she explained, showing them the encrypted notes their father had left about the Ravens operation. 6 more former Ravens operators indicted, Maya reported through their secure channel. "They're cooperating with federal investigators, revealing connections to classified programs we hadn't even discovered yet." Sarah served customers while reflecting on how their father's methods had proven right. He'd taught them that fighting corruption didn't always require direct confrontation. Sometimes the most effective weapon was careful observation and documented evidence. "The Route 66 corridor is being secured," Maya updated, reviewing federal reports. "Every facility they converted, every business they compromised, it's all being returned to legitimate operations. Your father's final mission is complete." Through the saloon's windows, Sarah watched the desert sunset painting Thunder Valley in golden light. The town had survived the Ravens' attempt to convert it into a classified military hub, emerging stronger for having faced the truth about what had threatened their community. "Found something else in Dad's files," Annie said quietly, sharing recently decoded documents. "He knew they'd kill him for investigating them. Made sure we'd have everything needed to expose their operation when the time came." Sarah studied the old photographs and notes, seeing their father's careful documentation of the Ravens' early activities. He'd recognized the pattern of criminal organizations being used as cover for classified military operations, had gathered evidence even knowing it would cost him his life. Final federal teams completing their sweep, Maya reported. Every piece of tactical equipment removed, every surveillance system dismantled. Thunder Valley is free of their influence. The saloon's evening crowd reflected the town's return to normalcy, tourists mixing with locals, enjoying the historic atmosphere without the underlying tension of the Ravens' presence. Sarah continued serving drinks, though now with the satisfaction of knowing her skills had helped protect rather than harm. Dad always said proper documentation was more powerful than violence, Annie reflected, reading through more of their father's decoded notes. Guess that's why he made sure we'd understand the patterns he'd uncovered. Through careful observation, Sarah watched her community healing from the Ravens' influence. The classified operations that had threatened to corrupt their town had been exposed exactly as their father had planned, through careful gathering of evidence rather than direct confrontation. Multiple agencies implementing new oversight protocols, Maya shared, reviewing secure updates. Using your father's documentation as a template for identifying similar operations. His methods are becoming standard procedure for exposing corruption. Sarah noticed more tourists arriving, drawn by the Dust Dancer's authentic Western atmosphere rather than the Ravens' hidden agenda. Thunder Valley was returning to what it was meant to be, a peaceful desert community preserving historical heritage rather than concealing classified operations. Found more of Dad's investigation files, Annie revealed, sharing newly discovered documents. He'd hidden them throughout his rare book collection, knowing we'd eventually understand what he'd discovered. The sisters shared a moment of quiet understanding as they reviewed their father's legacy. He'd died protecting his community from corruption, making sure his daughters would have everything needed to complete his mission when the time came. "Ready for dinner?" Annie asked, maintaining their weekly tradition though now with deeper appreciation for family bonds. "Ready," Sarah confirmed, hanging up her apron. The skills she'd honed in combat had served their true purpose, protecting family and community, just as their father had taught them. Through the saloon's windows, they watched Thunder Valley embracing its peaceful evening routine. The Ravens had thought they were dealing with a simple bartender and her bookstore owner sister. They never realized they'd threatened the daughters of the man who'd nearly exposed their operation, or that his children had the training and determination to finish what he'd started. The desert stars emerged as Sarah and Annie headed to dinner, their father's legacy living on in the peaceful community he'd died protecting. Sometimes the most effective weapon against corruption wasn't violence or force, but careful documentation and the strength of family bonds dedicated to exposing truth. 6 months after the Ravens' operation was exposed, Sarah stood behind the Dust Dancer's bar, serving drinks to genuine tourists seeking the authentic Western experience. Through the windows, Route 66 carried normal traffic, families on vacation, motorcycle enthusiasts enjoying the desert roads, all unaware of the classified operation that had nearly corrupted this historic highway. Latest update from federal oversight, Maya reported during her regular visit. Your father's methods are now standard procedure for investigating potential corruption. They're calling it the Mitchell Protocol, using documented evidence rather than force to expose criminal enterprises. Annie's bookstore had flourished since the Ravens' departure, her rare book collection growing without the threat of being used as cover for classified shipments. The sisters' weekly dinners had become a celebration of their father's legacy, not just his sacrifice, but the methods he'd taught them for fighting corruption through careful observation. 3 more former Ravens operators turned state's evidence, Maya shared, reviewing secure reports. The classified programs they were protecting. Everything's being exposed exactly as your father planned. His documentation is still revealing connections months after their operation was shut down. Sarah continued her work at the saloon, though now as its legitimate owner. Tom had retired, passing the historic business to someone he knew would protect its true purpose as a landmark rather than a cover for hidden agendas. The Dust Dancer had returned to its roots, preserving Western heritage instead of concealing government operations. Found another of Dad's hidden messages, Annie mentioned during their evening catch-up. He'd encrypted it in a first edition, knowing eventually we'd understand what he'd discovered. Even after death, he's still teaching us about protecting what matters. Thunder Valley had healed from the Ravens' influence, its community stronger for having faced the truth about what had threatened them. Sarah and Annie's bond had deepened through understanding their father's sacrifice, recognizing that his greatest legacy wasn't just exposing corruption, but teaching his daughters the power of family working together for justice. "Sometimes I miss the excitement," Sarah admitted to Maya during a quiet moment. But Dad was right. The most effective weapon against corruption isn't combat skills or force. It's careful documentation and the patience to expose truth at the right moment. Through the saloon's windows, they watched their desert community embracing its peaceful evening routine. The Ravens had thought they were dealing with simple small-town sisters. They never realized they'd threatened the family of the man who'd nearly exposed their operation, or that his daughters would use everything he'd taught them to finish what he'd started. "To Dad," Annie raised her glass during their weekly dinner, "who taught us that protecting what matters doesn't always require force. Sometimes it just needs dedication to truth and family working together." Sarah joined the toast, understanding now that her combat training had served its true purpose, not for violence, but for protecting community and family, just as their father had intended. The Mitchell sisters had become guardians of their father's legacy, ensuring that Thunder Valley remained exactly what it was meant to be, a peaceful desert town preserving history rather than concealing corruption. The desert stars emerged over Route 66, watching over a community that had faced darkness and emerged stronger. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against corruption isn't what people expect. Sometimes it's simply the dedication of family working together to expose truth, armed with nothing more than careful documentation and the strength of bonds that even death couldn't break. Epilogue. On a quiet evening at the Dust Dancer Saloon, Sarah poured drinks while watching Thunder Valley thrive under the desert sunset. The historic Route 66 had returned to its true purpose, a pathway for travelers seeking authentic Western experiences, not a corridor for classified operations. Through the windows, she could see Annie's bookstore, now a genuine haven for rare literature, rather than a front for covert activities. The Mitchell sisters had transformed their father's tragic death into a legacy of justice, proving that sometimes the strongest weapons against corruption are patience, documentation, and family bonds. "Your father would be proud," Maya said during her weekly visit, sharing news about the Mitchell Protocol being adopted by federal agencies nationwide. "His methods of exposing truth through careful observation rather than force are changing how we fight corruption." Sarah smiled, remembering her father's teachings. The Desert Ravens had thought they were threatening a simple bartender and her bookstore owner sister. Instead, they'd encountered the daughters of the man who'd nearly exposed their operation, women who'd inherited not just his determination, but his understanding that true justice comes through revealing truth rather than seeking revenge. "To Dad," the sisters toasted during their weekly dinner, celebrating not just his memory, but the lasting impact of his methods. The Mitchell family had proven that sometimes the most effective way to fight corruption isn't through combat skills or force, but through careful documentation, precise timing, and the unbreakable strength of family working together to protect what matters most. Under the desert stars, Thunder Valley stood as testament to their father's legacy, a community that had faced darkness and emerged stronger, protected not by violence, but by the power of truth and family bonds that even death couldn't break.